Welcome back to Tutorial Tidbits. I'm Elizabeth St. Hilaire, and this week I'm coming to you from beautiful Hacienda Mosaico in tropical Puerto Vallarta, where I have spent the last week giving an in-person fabulous florals workshop. If you're interested in joining me here this very same week next January, please go to their website and secure your spot. Spaces are filling fast, and I'll have the link down below. Here in Puerto Vallarta, the beach has been amazing. The water is so tropical and blue and warm. So this week's lesson is inspired by just that, the beach in sunny Mexico. So if you've got a few minutes, let's go check it out. Welcome back to the studio. So today we're going to be working with some fun, shimmery, sort of ocean, sea colored paints. And they are the Art Alchemy Sparks. I've got two colors here. One is Fairy Wings and the other is Night Shadow. So Fairy Wings is sort of like a green, gold, metallic. And the Night Shadow is like a teal, turquoise metallic. So I've got these two metallics, which I thought would be great to add like a shimmery kind of sun glistening on the ocean water effect. And to spread those out, I've got my palette knife. I've also got a little bit of Stickles glitter in this pot, and it's got some big chunky shapes in it. There's some little stars in there and a blend of gold with other colors, and I thought that could be fun to add to this project as well, creating this ocean kind of sea foam paper. I've got my 9x11 gel plate, which really fits my 9x12 chunky spirals stencil perfectly. And then, of course, I've got my 9x12 pad of rice paper that I use with my gel plate. The rice paper is very durable. It will not tear. The plate is pretty grabby, and when you press this paper onto the plate and you pull it off and you've got this grab, the paper is not going to tear. It's also highly absorbent, so it's wonderful to glue down for collage because it soaks up the glue and glues down perfectly flat without any cockling or wrinkling or bubbling. And that's what I do with my gel plates, gel prints, is that I make collages with them. So I'll get a couple extra sheets out of my pad, and it is the smooth side that I put down onto the plate. The paper is smooth on one side and rough on the other. And the side that is smooth is the side that is facing up when you open the pad. So when you open the pad, this is the smooth side, and that's the side that I put down on the plate so that it does not stick and so that it pulls off all the paint. So I'm also working with my favorite 6-inch brayer because it covers the 9x12 plate so quickly rather than trying to work with a little brayer and go all day to cover your plate and risk your paint drying. But I've got the 2-inch brayer because I'm going to spread paint out in a little area. And I think the 2-inch brayer will give me a little bit more control over applying a little bit of paint. So I'm going to try two different things. I've got the Chunky Spirals stencil, but I'm also thinking about playing with my foam stamp design called Rocks. And I love this foam stamp because it looks kind of like a chain link. And so when you stamp it next to itself and you start to move around, they'll all intersect with one another and kind of form a pattern that looks like it's all one because it's chain linked. So that's kind of fun. I don't know if we can put these together. I'm honestly just playing, and we'll see what happens because I haven't, you can tell from my hands and the plate that I haven't practiced this before getting on the video. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to print a light colored solid on 2 of the sheets. I always start with a solid base paper and not white so that I can build up on that base color, which gives me more rich layered prints without white spots and patterns in them that can be very visually distracting. So I'm putting the paint out, the Fairy Wings paint out with the palette knife. I might have put a little bit too much on here because you want a nice thin layer, and I'm rolling it out with the 6-inch brayer, which covers that 9x11 plate really easily and quickly. Okay, so then I'm going to take my rice paper with the smooth side goes down on the plate, and I'm going to give myself the first solid light colored print. And this is going to be the base for the effects that we create on top. So you can see how that rice paper pulls all the paint off the plate. That's what we want, pulls all the paint off. So the next layer is working on a clean plate. And look at this beautiful greenish gold metallic color. That is a lovely color. It's gold, but it's got a little bit of green in it, which is going to really lend itself to our seafoam ocean effect. So I'm going to take the brayer again and roll this out so that we have 2 sheets. So I've got 2 different effects that I know are going to look cool, and I'm just wondering if we can incorporate the stamp with the stencil. We'll see. So the second light colored solid sheet. I think actually I'll make 3 of these. It's always good to have an extra. And those of you who have ever studied collage with me know that you can never have enough paper. So here again, clean. And another beautiful sheet of fairy wings. And one last one. Put that out. And we'll make our third light colored solid sheet. There we go. I'm not really worried about a little bit of artifacting in there, a little bit of white spots or crumbs from previous prints. It'll all get layered out. I am going to take a clean sheet of paper to roll off my brayer. So I've got an old book here that I'm just going to roll my brayer off to clean it, to get the green gold off of it. And then the first thing I'm going to do with the rocks stamp is I'm going to take a little bit of this, what did we say it was? Night Shadow. And by the way, today, this week's video, today is February 1st, the 2nd is Wednesday, so 3rd, 4th, Friday the 4th of February 2022, these pots of metallic paint are on sale at Joggles. So that is just a coinky dink, but they are on sale. So you can get a good discount on these beautiful oceanic metallic colors, as well as a whole array of additional colors in these beautiful Art Sparks metallics. So now, oops, no, I didn't want to do that. So now I'm going to take the little brayer and sort of roll this out in an irregular pattern, leaving a decent amount of open space. And I may have put out a little bit too much paint for that. I'm going to get a clean book page off to the side, and I'm going to press the stamp into the paint and then transfer it over onto the plate and off onto the paper so I can do it again clean. So press and then transfer and then press. And this sheet over here may end up being something very cool. So I'm going to press into the paint, and then I'm going to transfer that paint out to the negative area. And I'm going to keep doing that. And like I said, you can stamp this in a manner that those chain links just interlock and create really great patterns. So again, I'm pressing into the paint. I'm transferring that paint into an open area and then pressing it off onto a clean sheet of paper so that it will still pick up paint from here and transfer and press and pick up and transfer and press. So pick up. I'm running out of places to transfer. Pick up, transfer, and clean. And I'll get another piece of paper to clean my stamp on. Now, when using a foam stamp with acrylic paint, you need to get that paint off the surface really quick before it dries. So it is a good idea to have a wet paper towel here off to the side that you can stamp the stamp into to keep it moist or clean the paint off. So do as I say, not as I do. Okay, so I think we're good here. And then we're going to take the prepared solid and print. And what you get is sort of this fun kind of watery effect with the stamp in and out of the messy area that we did with the dark teal. So now I'm going to take some of the fairy wings and put it over that night shadow. And we'll roll that out. I have to clean this brayer off. And we'll roll this over. And this print should be a little bit more subtle than the first one and a little bit more watery because we pulled off the majority of the paint, and this should be more subtle. So now I'm going to come back with another prepared sheet and take that print. And here we've got a real soft, watery print. I love the watery, soft effect on that. But we've lost sort of the effect of the rocks stamp. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to put some more of the night shadow out. Roll that out with the brayer. And I'm going to use the gel plate as my stamp pad. And I'm going to press and transfer and move. Let's see, I'll move this so you can see a little better. We'll put this here and we'll press and transfer. And I'm going to change the direction and print as many times as I can get paint to keep coming off. So the first print will be bold, and then the second and third prints will be lighter. And we'll slowly move around and let these interlock with each other, creating a paper that has the pattern over the whole thing. So we're getting this nice watery kind of effect with the two metallics and the rock stamp blending together. So the next step is I'm going to run this under some water. Best way to keep that stamp wet while you're working with it is that wet paper towel, and just put it face down into the wet paper towel, and that won't allow the paint to dry on the surface of the stamp. So I've got some paint still on the plate. I'm going to roll that out. I'll bring this back over into the center. I'm going to roll that night shadow color out on the plate, and then I'm going to bring in my Chunky Spirals 9x12 stencil and use that third sheet of the prepared fairy wings. I'm going to make sure I get good contact. This stencil has got a lot of paint built up and dried on it, so it's going to require a little bit more pressure for me to get the rice paper through all the patterns. And before I take it out, I'm going to make sure I got a good transfer. And I've got a beautiful swirly kind of water pattern, and that's pretty high contrast. But the nice thing about the metallic paints is that they're pretty opaque, and they're going to cover. So we're going to add a little bit more of the fairy wings. And I've rolled the brayer out to be clean. I'm going to put that over the nightshade so we get a little bit of a blend of those two colors. I'm going to put the Chunky Spirals back on and flip the paper in a different direction so we're not lining up with the stencil exactly like we did the first time. And here we've got a second pattern of the Chunky Spirals coming back over the night shadow with the fairy wings, which is going to lighten up the intensity of that. So now we've made it a little more subtle, softer, and we can do that also by let's lift and also flip directions and put the ghost print over itself. So now it's even more toned down. And I'm going to do one more layer of the fairy wings just to make this even more soft and watery. So I'm going to roll out the fairy wings. And I'm going to put that right over and pull a light print. So now I'm getting this nice sort of shimmery water effect with this swirly chunky spirals and a couple of different layers of the two metallic colors. So now I'm going to do one more layer. I'm going to put a little bit of the night shadow out and more of the fairy wings. We're going to blend it together to create a color that's in the middle of the two. Rolling that out with my 6-inch brayer for nice coverage on the 9x11 gel plate so that I have full advantage of the 9x12 stencil, and I'm printing almost every bit of the 9x12 sheet of paper. Very little waste here with this size gel plate. So let's put that back down and get the pattern again with the two colors mixed, blended to create a value in the middle. So we're layering, layering, layering here. Lots of layers is what it takes to create really interesting gel prints. So here we go. Now I've got another layer, and this is just getting more rich and more beautiful with all these layers of the beautiful metallic sort of ocean-inspired spirals. So now I've got a ghost print under here. I'm going to use a cleanup sheet and take a little bit more paint out of the negative spaces there so that my ghost print will be a little bit more defined. So I'm taking a little bit more paint out of the negative spaces here. I'm going to look at that and make sure I've got it pretty cleaned out there. Before I dismount it, I'm going to check and make sure I've got all the paints out. And now when I lift this, I'm going to have a really good ghost print that I'm going to put over our first print that is now still pretty high contrast. So I'm going to put a ghost print over that to knock back the night shadow being so high contrast to the fairy wings. So now you can see the spiral on top, and the next step is to bring back in the rocks stamp and put that on top again over to subdue the darker night shadow color. So we did get this one that's sort of soft and blendy, which is just a different pattern to the chunky spirals is the rock stamp. And now I'm going to move the gel plate over here, put the print like this, and we're going to do fairy wings with the rock stamp on top. The nice thing about these paints is that the metallics are opaque. So even though the fairy wings is a light color, it will show up over the darker night shadow. So we're going to print and stamp. And I'm going to do this specifically on the dark areas. So I'm going to be stamping where the paint is darker so that I can lighten it up. And this is an example of the rocks stamp working with the spiral, chunky spiral stencil. So we've got both patterns going on here. So again, I'm just stamping on the dark areas to tone back, subdue that high contrast, and create some more layers. Don't be afraid to go off the edges. I'm working on my nonstick craft mat, so the paint will wipe right off, so I can take my stamp and go off the edges. And here we go. I can take my wet paper towel and just wipe. When it dries, you sometimes have to scrape it with your thumb, but it all comes right off. So now we've got an interesting sort of watery pattern with the rocks stamp and a little bit of that chunky spiral stencil. So this is the sheet with the two combined. Here it is with just the rock stamp and the watery background. And here it is with the chunky spirals layer. So I want to do one more of chunky spirals in here so we can see it a little bit better with the rock stamp. So I'm going to put the gel plate right there. I'm going to roll the brayer off on a clean sheet of paper so I can get back to clean. I'm going to take the chunky spirals and a little bit of the night shadow. I can find my palette knife. Put a little bit of that out. And again, I'm going to mix it with a little bit of the fairy wings. So it's not quite so dark. So we're going to go for an intermediate value here. And then roll that out. And I'm not even going to roll it completely to blend it. You can see that it's sort of mottled here. And I think that's going to go well with that sort of half and half small brayer marking that we did in the first layer. So let's bring back the chunky spirals and put that on top of the multi-layers we've got going here. We could come out with something better. We could come out with something worse. But you know what? You're never going to know unless you try. So this is the sheet that has the two combined, the rocks stamp, foam stamp, and the chunky spirals. So before I dismount it, I'm going to check and make sure I have good contact. When your stencil does get thick with paint, sometimes you have to pay a little more attention to that. This is a very well-loved stencil. I have been using it and using it and using it and sharing it in the classroom because everybody loves spirals. So it's really been very well loved, and that's why it's got so much paint on it. Might be time for me to get a new one. So let's see. So I still see some paint on the plate, but again, that's because we've got a lot of paint going on here and the thickness of this stencil from multiple layers. But let's see, I think that's pretty good. So now look at this richness. So now I brought the spirals back and I've got the rock stamp and the spirals and the layers with metallics, and we are able to go light over dark over light over dark because of the opaque quality of these metallics. The fairy wings, the light color, it doesn't obliterate the night shadow, but it definitely shows up on top of it. Look at this. We're making some beautiful, watery, Puerto Vallarta inspired oceanic prints here. We've got a ghost print under here still. I don't know if I want to put it on this one or if I want to put it on one of these. It might look interesting blended with the rock stamp here. Let's do this. Sometimes you don't want to ruin something that you have. So let's take half of this, and we'll take half of this, and then we'll still have those two, and we'll add the ghost print and see how that looks. So we still will have one sheet of just chunky spirals and one sheet of just the rock stamp, and then we'll have the one that is the full sheet that is the two of them together. And now we'll take the ghost print and we'll do half and half. And this is always an option. So we'll do half and half. And that way we've saved the sheets that we've already fallen in love with, but we've given ourselves another option with half of each of them. Okay, so here's the ghost print. It's just very subtle. You can see it right here. It's very subtle because it's pretty light. And so it's not making a big change. It's very similar to this one. And it's added a little bit of spiral to this one. So that was an experiment. But now we've got several different versions of this lovely metallic, oceanic, Mexico-inspired metallic papers. And I think these are going to be beautiful for collage. Well, we nearly forgot to add the glitter. How could we forget to add the glitter? So let's do that. I mean, this could be the best effect of the whole thing. So the Stickles glitter is going to be in gel, suspended in a nice thick gel. And there are large chunks, little stars and large chunks in the pot that you can't get through the squeeze top. So I thought this would be kind of cool for the ocean effect. So I'm just going to spread it with my palette knife and sort of scrape it across the surface of this paper. And the nice thing about the glitter being suspended in the gel is that when it dries, you can rub it and it does not flake off because it's encapsulated in this gel glue, and it really stays on the paper quite nicely. So it's not messy because there's no putting down glue and then shaking the glitter into it and having to tap it off. It's all suspended in this gel. So I'm going to spread it with my palette knife, just sort of lightly across there to give it just another layer. It's like mermaid tail now, isn't it? It's just fantastic. So let's add that onto this one as well. Just a little scoop of it, and we'll just scrape it sort of lightly across so that we don't want to cover it up too much so we can't see the beautiful spiral and chain link pattern underneath. So I'm just using a little and scraping it quite thin. So for that, it'll go pretty far when you're just scraping it pretty thin. And you can really see the stars, the chunky stars in there, and how this is really, really adding just another layer to my already awesome metallic ocean-inspired papers. So let's put it on all of them and see what we get. The beginning of the month is the best time to join me on Patreon. Patreon is where I take tutorial tidbits to a whole nother level. Multi-part, in-depth video series on all steps of my process, and upon subscribing, you have immediate access to all archived material going all the way back to 2020, and new material every week. So check me out, patreon.com/Elizabeth St. Hilaire. And if you're already a patron, thanks for the support. That's what allows these tidbits to be possible. So there we go. So now we've got some mermaid effect to our metallics. I love it, and I can't wait to use it in collage.